This is On the Other Hand, a podcast sponsored by Braver Angels in Arkansas that explores politics and other issues of importance to Arkansans through conversations with the community leaders. Stay with us as we talk to another leader in Arkansas who works across differences to get things done and to bring us closer together.
Hello and welcome to On the Other Hand. I'm your host, April Chatham Carpenter, and I'm here today with my co-host, Glenn White. On our podcast, Glenn and I interview community leaders in Arkansas who help work towards solutions across various political or other divides, or who in other ways reach across various divisions within our community and country. So I'm excited about our guest today. Glenn, tell us who we have.
Hi, April. Yeah, today we're very honored to be speaking with Asa Hutchinson, who I'm sure everybody knows. He was recently a two-term Republican governor for Arkansas. Before that, he was a US Congressman and a number of other things. Some of the prior roles include he served as US Attorney. He was one of the House managers for Bill Clinton's impeachment trial in the Senate. He was head of the Drug Enforcement Administration for a while. He's chaired the National Governors Association. At any rate, welcome to On the Other Hand, Asa.
Well, thank you, Glenn and April. It's great to be with you for the show today. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Let's start with this. Look back on your career, if you will, and tell us, what do you think you're most proud of?
Well, there's a great deal I'm thankful for and the opportunity to serve. But of all the roles that I have played, from a federal prosecutor to congressman to being in the Bush administration, being governor of Arkansas has been the highest honor in my public life. And then you look at, well, what do we do as governor? And it's the first time we ever had, Republican control. Where it was a Republican governor with a Republican legislature, and we changed the climate. So I'm very proud of the fact that we reversed increased taxes in Arkansas, and we lowered the tax from 7% down to 4.9% when I left after 8 years. But we also shrunk the size of state government in the sense of we had 3,000 fewer state workers when I left state government than when I began. And it just takes a while to absorb the magnitude of that constriction of the public payroll. And then, of course, we created a surplus. When I became governor, they wanted to spend every dime every year. That was after 100 years of Democratic rule. And we changed the climate where you actually created a savings, and I left with a $2 billion plus surplus. So very proud of what we did while I was governor. But I'll mention one other thing, and that is when I was a very young United States attorney appointed by President Reagan, in fact, the youngest in the nation at the age of 31. And then in 1985, we had in Arkansas a terrorist group called the Covenant, the Sword and Arm of the Lord. And whenever you think about Waco and that disaster, when you think about Ruby Ridge and the mishandling of that by the federal officials, and then you think about what we did in Arkansas, where we peacefully had the terrorists surrender after 3 days of negotiation. I was not only involved in that, but I assisted in the negotiation. They asked me to put on a bulletproof vest. They threw to me. They asked me to go out and help with the hostage rescue team. And that has been a memorable event as I prosecuted them in court very successfully. There's an HBO movie out now that ties in from the CSA to the federal building in Oklahoma City that Timothy McVeigh blew up. And so it was a very difficult time in our country, and we handled that successfully, and I was a significant part of that. So those are a couple things I'm very proud of in my career.
Gotcha. I look forward to seeing that movie on HBO. That sounds good. So you've done a lot, as you point out. Let's get into what you're doing now. You're not in elected office anymore. So what's keeping you busy now, and where do you think you're headed in the future?
Well, thank you for asking that. And first, running for president, people ask me, it was unsuccessful. We ran into a brick wall, but it was one of the greatest experiences that I have had. I'm grateful that I did that, and I raised issues that are important. I raised different leadership options, and all the candidates that ran against Donald Trump dropped out, including myself. But what an incredible experience I had, and probably my great memory of it is just simply that whether you're talking about Arkansas, Iowa, or New Hampshire, people care about the direction of our country, and they got a heart for America. We always don't agree, but that was the encouraging part to me. So what am I doing now? I'm teaching. I love the opportunity to teach on university campuses. I've been to Washington Lee University. I've been to Duke this year. I'll be doing some teaching at the University of Arkansas Law School. And I have an opportunity to go to Harvard. They need a conservative in Harvard, so I expect to do that this fall. So I'm doing some teaching, and then I have my business and consulting practice in which I'll be chairman of a security company. I've got a security company in California that I'm involved with. So it's about business, it's about security, it's about teaching and mentoring. And then I'm doing some political commentary. I'll be at the convention next week doing commentary for Scripps News. And so that keeps me engaged politically, but I'm doing a lot on the business side and the security side.
Well, I know you've had lots of life experiences, Asa, that have influenced your approach to politics. And I oftentimes think about those life experiences in terms of values that we are taking in and we're living out. So talk about your values and maybe some life experiences that have influenced your approach.
Well, thank you, April. And first, when Glenn asked me what I'm doing, I'll add that family has really been important to me. And so it's nice to be able to spend a little more time with my grandchildren, as well as be home here in Rogers a little bit more in Northwest Arkansas. But in terms of what's influenced me in politics, it starts with my faith. And I am a Christian believer, and my faith influences my responsibilities here in this world. And I believe we're responsible in eternity for what we do here. And that means that we're to make a difference. And that led me into the law as a lawyer, but it also led me into politics, because you can influence your culture, you can influence the environment in which we live. And I think you make a difference for eternity as well. So and what's the fundamental part of faith that influences you in politics is respect for the individual, whether that is being pro-life, but it's also respect for each other in terms of their views, in terms of their right to express themselves, and the ability to hopefully find common ground on many different issues. So my faith has impacted me. My experiences when I got elected to Congress, that was 25 years ago, but it was the last time we actually had bipartisan retreats. Now we all go to our separate corners and we learn how to fight each other. Well, back then we actually had bipartisan retreats, and we looked at ways that we could work together on issues, and I led that effort. So in terms of one particular issue, so that influences me. My experiences in working with people, whether it was in Congress, whether it was in the administration and Homeland Security, where it's not Republican or Democrat, independent, it's how you secure America and get the job done at the border. And so I've been operationally focused. I've been working with people throughout my career, and that influenced me as governor as well.
Well, one of the things that really impressed me, and Asa had just moved back not too many years before that to Arkansas, had been away for a bit, and your handling of the COVID pandemic. I don't know how many people I've talked to over the the months that we were in the COVID lockdown and watching your press conferences and things that you would do. And I felt a sense of comfort every time that I would hear you talk. I don't know. I know that there was not everybody that agreed with you, but you seem to have a real transparent and reasoned decision-making approach and involving a wide group of people in helping make decisions. I know not everyone agreed with your approach, but I wondered if there were specific key factors that kind of guided your approach and policy decisions during that time.
Well, it was a tough time for our country, and my approach, first of all, was be prepared as I could be, and my background in Homeland Security and managing emergencies helped me through that time. I was lucky or fortunate, blessed to have Dr. Nate Smith, who was head of my Department of Health, followed by Dr. Jose Romero, and infectious disease experts. So you obviously listen to them. And then you bring in the community. I brought in hospital administrators. I had a winter task force that brought in the right medical professionals, but also, other professionals from pharmacists to help guide me in terms of the decision making. But what's very important is that you can get all the science, you can get all the data, you can get all the recommendations, but ultimately you have to decide what's best for the state and the people of Arkansas. And you balance it with our culture, with our independence, with what we can tolerate, and what our needs are in terms of a job and providing for your family and for your social engagement. And so that is very, very important part of the leadership. And you mentioned transparency. I get comments 2.5 years after the pandemic. People say, thank you. I listen to you every day. You communicated. And that really helped everybody. They understood that it hurt me when I had to announce how many people died or the challenges that we faced. But I was transparent, and whether it's a mistake or not, they saw that I was being honest with them at the time. And so I think we did a couple of good things. One was we had enormous national pressure to shut our economy down and to shelter in place. Arkansas was one of 5 states under my leadership that said, no, we're not going to do that. My view was if you have a job, if you have a business that provides jobs for families, that means you're an essential business. And we didn't distinguish essential and non-essential businesses. And we didn't shelter in place. The second thing was we kept our kids in school. And we all went virtual at the very beginning, but soon I realized we needed to have in-classroom instruction. It was the social engagement. It was the protection that schools provide. It was the learning. And we needed that. And so we went back to school. We had some opposition, but I was proud of the fact that Arkansas, there's a study done, and we were second in the nation in terms of days of in-classroom instruction during the pandemic. And that's something that was right decision, proud of, even though we had some opposition to it.
So many good things to look back on. And during that time of hardship, I know that opposition is something that happens whenever you're in politics or in leadership. And I'm curious in general, how do you deal with the criticism that you receive in those kinds of settings?
Well, first of all, you listen to it and then you evaluate it. So I just didn't blow off criticism. I said, is there something that we need to change? Is there something we're doing wrong? Maybe we need to communicate better. And so, criticism is important, and you listen to it and evaluate it. And that's how we handled it. Now, the sad thing is, we got divided in our country during the pandemic, and some of it was based upon facts, some of it wasn't. And, people thought that I shut all the businesses on Main Street down. Well, I didn't shut the businesses on Main Street down. The businesses closed on their own because they didn't have customers. And so, there's a lot of misunderstanding as to what was done then. Or the churches. We made sure that we didn't put any restrictions on churches. churches are separate from the government and we're not to control them. And so we didn't set, whenever we had guidelines to follow for businesses, we didn't have that applied to churches. And so you try to work through the criticism that you might have. When I wanted to open the schools, I had teachers protesting out in front of the mansion in coffins, saying you're going to kill us. And so it was pretty tough. But we were doing the right thing, and we got our substitute teachers there as needed. And by and large, all the teachers across Arkansas were very, very supportive. But we had the union that pushed some of those protests. So criticism comes with the job. You evaluate it, you listen to it, and then you make your decision, and you try to explain it the best you can to your voters.
You had several other difficulties and tough things to deal with. One of the things I remember, because it happened more than once or twice, and that was that during your governorship, you were able to pass Medicaid expansion that was a part of Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, despite some pretty strong opposition from a number of very conservative legislators in your own party. So I was wondering, how did you and your administration accomplish that, and would that approach still work in today's environment?
Well, first of all, just a little bit of history. I inherited the Medicaid expansion. So it was done during the Beebe administration with the Republican legislature, and they worked together to pass Arkansas version of Medicaid expansion, which was the private option, utilizing the private insurance market to versus strict Medicaid to provide that option for the working poor. And so I had to evaluate it, though, Glenn, decide, are we going to ditch it? Or are we going to continue on with it? And I studied it. I researched it. I looked at the impact on our rural hospitals, on our rural communities, and on those that needed health care. And I said, the best financial outcome for Arkansas is to continue that expansion. We had to have 75% vote to get that done. And so you had an easy majority every year, but I had to cobble together a 3/4 vote. And that was where it was very, very difficult. Took a lot of leadership and a lot of understanding by those that took that risk and voted for it. I also supported them whenever they stood with me in their reelection. And I think they knew, the legislatures knew, that if they supported the efforts that were important for our state, I would be out there with them as well. And now you look at it, it's not even controversial. It passes every year, the appropriation, with an easy 75 votes. And you had to bring Democrats and Republicans to vote for it to get it passed. But now it's just part of our healthcare system. Arkansas is struggling with our rural hospitals still, but we would have lost so many rural hospitals had we not continued that expansion.
Getting 75%, that's really impressive, even when you have a majority. But, what that means is some of those people were kind of grudging, voters for it. And that's the way our democratic republic is supposed to work, right? The founders designed it so that we have to work together, find common ground, and compromise. Now, the problem I see now is that compromise almost seems to be a dirty word anymore in our current political environment. So, in fact, some people think you're betraying your party if you in any way compromise with someone on the other side. I wonder what you think about the possibilities of us getting back to at least some occasional reasonable compromises and some bipartisan cooperation.
Well, let me be optimistic on this question. And first, on the Medicaid expansion, we did compromise and we did change things. And for example, we put in a work requirement. We put in some reviews that legislatures insisted upon if you want me to vote for that. So that's part of compromise, but it's also part of the reform and conservative principles we put into the Medicaid expansion. But let's talk about nationally just for a second. Speaker Johnson's a good example of this. He took the reins of leadership in Congress and he got briefed on the importance of funding for Ukraine and support for Ukraine. And contrary to what had happened when it had been killed in the House, he brought it up for a vote, and he cobbled together Republican votes and Democrat votes and passed the support for Ukraine as well as for Israel. That was leadership on Speaker Johnson's part. Whenever you look at border security effort, we had a bill that Senator Langford, a very conservative of Oklahoma, worked on. It was a bipartisan approach that ultimately was killed by probably President Trump, and saying, I'd rather have that as an issue versus getting that passed. But that was work in progress, and that gave us all the conservative things that we wanted in border security, at least most of those. And so it happens, whether you look at Senator Cornyn of Texas and Senator Murphy working together to close a loophole after the Uvalde shooting, where you had teens having access, even though they might have a violent record, to a firearm. Well, that gap was closed so that and it was done on a bipartisan way. So there's examples of good work, compromise, bipartisanship. It's just that it seems to be the exception and not the rule. But I'm glad to see there's glimmers of hope that it still can work in today's environment.
Good. Well, one of the big problems, of course, is the very reason Braver Angels was created. Our society politically has become so polarized, and the research says that when a society becomes highly polarized, there are a number of things that derive from that. One is that the people who are polarized tend to start developing more extreme views, extreme behaviors, and that's true regardless of what party you belong to or what ideology you subscribe to. Many observers now are suggesting that our polarized society is causing extremists in both parties to have this outsized influence on their own party's policies. And that's, again, in both parties. It has a big impact on how governing occurs. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on how we might bring back some moderation in each party, and as well as among independents, into having more of a role in our elections and in our governing.
Well, that's a fundamental question. And first of all, you're absolutely right. It is a challenge for us that we yield so often to the loudest voice in the room rather than trying to work through solutions. And to cure this, first of all, there's a debate that goes on today within the Republican Party, and the legislature will have to address it, as to whether we should have open or closed primaries. And of course, an open primary is where if you're an independent, you can go in and you can decide to vote in the Democratic primary or the Republican primary. And if you close off that, then you're going to stop independents from voting in the Republican primary or the Democrat primary. And I think that's harmful. I think it would hurt. Of course, I'm a Republican, so I look at it from a Republican standpoint. And we have the largest primary by far, but it's partly because we have independents voting with us. And if you exclude those independents, then you're going to diminish, you're going to push the candidates further to rejecting independent thought, to not being able to attract independent votes in the general election. And so, to me, the issue of open or closed primaries is very important to keep more balance and to keep the Republican Party in the mainstream of Arkansas thought and values. And then you have to have fair redistricting as well. That's our congressional, our legislative seats. So, they're not 100% Republican. You've got to be able to attract a broad base of support. And there's always that partisan mix that's involved in redistricting. But let's not go to the extreme where you either got a Democrat seat or a Republican seat, and you don't have any seats that you really have to focus on the independent votes and the middle of our political environment. And then finally, it's about leadership. I mentioned, you go into a town hall meeting and the temptation is just to listen to the loudest voices in the room. Leadership is about educating and informing and making sure that you listen to everybody and not just that loudest voice in the room. We've had division in our country all through history, but we've always had leadership that rose above it and said, let's see if we can't come together. That's what we need today, is leadership that does not further the divide in America, that tries to bring us together.
And I did want to ask for clarification on that issue of open versus closed primaries. I'm aware of what's going on now in the Republican Party in the state and trying to, require registered Republicans to be the only ones involved in the primaries. There's a pretty strong element of people who say open primaries are the way out of extremism, where you have people of all parties and independents who all run for the office at the same time rather than within a party primary. Can you clarify for me which one you're favoring?
Well, I'll put it this way, that if the Republicans closed off the primaries and say we're going to not allow independents to vote, then that will increase the pressure to have ranked choice voting, or some type of Louisiana approach where you have a joint primary and then you have a runoff and all the parties participate in the same one. And so I think we will probably get to that. Other states are experimenting with these. We're going to learn from that. I believe in the two-party system in America. And so that's not my first option, but if we're starting to close off primaries, we're going to wind up having to go to that type of joint primary system.
Well, Asa, I have a question that's related to your long history as a conservative politician. Some, as you ran for president, some of your recent stances, especially your opposition to Trump, led some in the Republican Party to claim that you were a Republican in name only, or the lovely term of rhino. And I'm curious about how much difference you see now in the views and values of yourself and of the Republican Party currently as compared to maybe the Republican Party from earlier in your career when you served as US Congressman.
Well, I think it's important for us to know our history, and I became a Republican 4 decades ago when we were extreme minority. I worked hard to build the Republican Party in this state with a lot of sacrifice of myself and many, many people. We created joint primaries. We competed with the Democrats. We built the party. We built it on conservative principles as well as working hard and fighting hard. I did that. And so, yes, I'm a conservative Republican, and I'll put my conservative record against anyone's. Arkansas became the #1 pro-life state in the nation under my leadership as governor. Whenever you look at the lowering taxes, no one's done it more than me as governor. Whenever you look at shrinking the size of government, we've done that. And so my conservative record, both in Congress as well as governor, is indisputable. And my plan when I ran for president was very conservative. But if you disagree with Trump, all of a sudden you become, as they say, a rhino. And so to me, if you stand up and give a different level of thought, then you're going to be accused of violating the platform of the party, which is a little bit ironic because no one has changed the platform of our party more than what Donald Trump has just done in this convention, moving us away from a strict pro-life position, advocating for a ring around America so that we're a protectionist party now, where you move away from support of Ukraine and the leadership role of America in the world. And so, yes, I'll put my conservative credentials up against anyone. And it's really the principles of the party that we've long stood for that are now changing in a way that we ought to, if as conservatives, we ought to be distressed about. And so you can be a principled person and still someone that can work with the other side or work to get things done. And that doesn't make you a Republican in name only. That makes you a Republican that gets things done, a conservative that can accomplish things. And so I would just remind people of my history, my conservative record, my devotion to the party. And some people have left the party. Man, I'm fighting within the party. I'll be at the convention next week. And I hope that the Republican Party can return to its principles, conservative principles that really have distinguished us from the Democrats and have given us a great success story.
You have a vision for the Republican Party going forward?
That we return to a party of character, the rule of law, and that we also support the working men and women of America through growth of manufacturing and creating more middle-class jobs. To me, that's the strength of the Republican Party. And my vision of it in the future is just like Ronald Reagan in 1976, he lost to Gerald Ford, and it was a fight for the soul of the party, and he lost. And Gerald Ford went and lost in the November election. Well, the country turned to Ronald Reagan in 1980. He got elected because they said we need those conservative values and his optimism about our country and vision for America. To me, our Republican Party is in a very similar place today, that there's a fight for the soul of the party. Right now, Donald Trump has the soul of the party and defines the party. And it looks like he's in good position to win. But where are we going to go long term? Are we going to be protectionists? Are we going to put a ring around of America? Are we going to abandon our leadership? Are we going to be the party that undermines the rule of law? Are we going to support the rule of law in our country? And are we going to be the party that believes character is important? And I believe that when you speak of character, you're not calling a political opponent scum. You're not wishing ill on someone. You are reflecting the spirit of America and saying we want to reflect America as a country of goodness and not just power. To me, that's what the Republican Party stands for, and I want to fight for that.
I think a lot of people would be supportive of that. You know, in recent weeks, we've had divisions in how people view the political parties, I think because of a lot of what's been going on and how the media covers it as well. Certainly the two presidential candidates that we have differing views and differing approaches. And the Supreme Court recently regarding legal immunity for the president. Any thoughts to share about any of the issues related to that? Well,
first of all, when that opinion came out, I put my lawyer hat on and I read the opinion, and the distinction that the United States Supreme Court made, that the President of the United States cannot be prosecuted for official acts. And that's a pretty extraordinary ruling by the court. And I do think the president needs to have broad authority without having to worry about criminal prosecution in the official acts. But it obviously is something that can be abused. So this is a new gray area for us. And I'm quite frankly, I think you have to apply that opinion, not just simply to Donald Trump. You take him out of the picture totally. How about a George Bush, or how about a President Biden, or how about an unknown person down the road that will be president? Do we want them to be above the law in the sense of exempt from prosecution for official acts? Because I handled the impeachment trial of William Jefferson Clinton. And of course, we've had a couple of impeachments since then. And the argument is, let's don't impeach them. If they've done wrong, they'll be held accountable in our justice system when they leave office. Well, that's thrown out the window with the Supreme Court decision. I would encourage everybody to follow Justice Amy Coney Barrett, a Trump-appointed judge who is doing an incredible job, and she wrote a concurring opinion that tried to bring a little bit more accountability to a future president. And so I like her thinking on it, and she approved the reversal where there is that immunity, but she drew a few distinctions there that I think are important. I thought it was, when you looked at the minority opinion, Justice Sotomayor, and she sounded the alarm that you're going to have a president being able to use official acts to telling the SEAL team to go out and kill a political opponent. Well, you have to remember we do have impeachment. We do have a lot of transparency. There's a lot of public scrutiny on the president that obviously is a restraining force. So I don't think it's all gloom and doom, but this is going to be something that we have to deal with from a rule of law standpoint for probably the next couple of decades as the Supreme Court more clearly defines how we hold presidents accountable, just like we do every citizen.
Yeah, I think about one of the things I've heard a lot in the last year from Trump is talking about exacting vengeance on his opponents, and if the worst case scenario of that ruling is true, it holds true, then that would allow him to do most anything. In fact, you were one of the ones who talked against Trump. I mean, do you feel any kind of concerns about that down the road?
Well, I'm concerned about a president that wants to enact vengeance on political opponents using his immunity as a reason to tell the IRS to go after him. That's an official act, and he would be immune from prosecution for that. Or to tell the Justice Department to wiretap their phones. We've actually had that happen in past presidencies, and that's a scary thing, to think that the government can be doing things while there might be some checks. Immunity from prosecution is a step we've never taken before. And fundamental to America is equality in our treatment under the law. So it worries me, but I'm also hopeful that that won't happen. But that's one of the reasons nobody should be motivated by vengeance when they become president of the United States.
Here. So we usually finish with a personal story. I did have this question about the Second Amendment rights, so let me kind of run that at you, and if you can have a quick answer, then we'll finish up. So you've long been a supporter of Second Amendment rights in terms of guns. All constitutional rights do have some limits, and it even in the Second Amendment mentions the phrase well-regulated militia. So it seems that there are some limits to the Second Amendment and rights of guns. And I wonder what you think are those limits. What is a reasonable limit? When's the line crossed? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I agree with the United States Supreme Court decision that said the Second Amendment applies to individual rights, and it's not just for a militia. So I do believe it applies individually. And sure, there are limits. I prosecuted people for, holding a machine gun without a license. And so I think the distinction between automatic weapons and semi-automatic weapons is relevant. We ought to make sure there's extra protections if somebody wants to own military type weapons. So I'm not for further restrictions on it, but I want to make sure that we do all we can to make sure that people who have firearms and exercise their Second Amendment, that they're not convicted felons, they're not mentally found incompetent by a court, and to make sure that we have those reasonable protections in their place.
Okay. Well, thank you for that thought, let's finish with a personal story. We always like to do that with our guests. Something that you could share. It could be something light and funny. It could be something inspirational, something remarkable. What would you like to end with?
Well, I'll tell you an experience that I had in Iowa. I was campaigning and came across an Iowa farmer, and I told him about myself, and I asked him about himself, his crops and things. And at the end of the conversation, he looked at me and he said, "Asa, you're running for president of the United States and you seem normal."
That's awesome.
You know, it just illustrates the point that there's a yearning for normalcy in America. And so I use that as an example of how let's get away from the craziness. Let's get back to normal. And that's my hope for America. That normal in terms of our values, our character, our goodness, our leadership, our conservative values, that to me is normal, but it's also normal to respect the individual. And even if they're a political opponent, it's important to have traditions. It's important to have respect that's shown in ways in Congress. We would say, my colleague from across the aisle or my friend from across the aisle, that might be superficial, but that is important in our society, that we demonstrate respect. And to me, that's normal. I think the Iowa farmer got it just right.
That's awesome. Well, Asa, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We just want to tell you thank you for your leadership over the years for Arkansas and for our nation, and for the continued good work that you're doing to bring people together. So thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for coming with us.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, April. Great to be with you.
Well, thanks for joining us today on this edition of On the Other Hand. Be sure to check out our other podcasts, which can be found on the podcast page of the Braver Angels Arkansas website, and that is at arkansas.braverangels.org, or you can find it on many popular podcast sites.
When you do visit that website, in addition to links to all our episodes, you'll find a link to email us at otherhandar@gmail.com, where you can send us program feedback or suggested speakers or topics. You'll find many other episodes featuring past guests that we think you'll want to hear.
On the Other Hand is sponsored by Braver Angels in Arkansas. Music was composed by Randall Standridge of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and was performed by the University of Northern Colorado Symphonic Band, Dr. Richard Main, conductor.
From your host, Glenn White,
and April Chatham Carpenter,
let's each do our part to bring our community closer together.